Well, good evening, everybody. Sorry it took so long to get back up and running. Been a pretty rough week, pretty long week. As you can tell, lost my hair. Well, shaved it. I was losing it, so went ahead and shaved it. Um, it was losing all of my beard and my mustache too, so went ahead and shaved that off too. Even though I got 2 more rounds of chemo to go, eh, get it out of the way. I wasn't going to sit there and lose patches all day long. Um, but with that being done, feeling good today. I wanted to get this one out there real quick, um, and then we're going to change up on some things. Now, I'll mention it again at the end of the video. This one's going to be quick, but I'm going to. There's a website out called hackertest.net. I don't know anything about it. Uh, just did some research on sites like Hack This Site and Hellbound Hackers, and this one came up. Um, Apparently, from what I know, there's 20 different levels, and you just get one level at a time. So you got to get through a level to get to level two to get. So you can't jump around. So it's not like Hack This Site. That's what we're going to start working on next. So I'm going to get this one out of the way, and then we're going to jump into the hacker test. I'll try to put a couple of those up a week. Depends on how difficult they are, and we'll see where it goes. But this one here, I want to do risk calculations. Again, this is going to be highly important, especially in CYSA. If you take cybersecurity analyst CompTIA test, you're going to definitely have some questions on this, on risk and magnitude, threats, all that type of stuff. Security, you will have some, not quite as much. So what we're going to take a look at, we're going to look at BIA and ROI and ALEs and SLEs and AROs and all those different type of things. I'm going to give you some scenario questions like I had on CYSA. Okay, so first off, let's start with kind of the basics, the AV, the EF, and the SLE. Okay, so really what we're doing risk calculations. Probability times the magnitude is going to give us a risk. Okay, so we have to know how to do things like quantitative risk calculations. Calculations where we actually have monetary figures. Can't do it every time, but where we have monetary figures, mostly where this is headed. So the first things we want to deal with are AV, EF, and SLEs. Okay, so the AV, that is the asset value itself. That concrete value of an asset, be it a database, be it a server, whatever it is, it's the concrete cost of that. Then we have this thing called the exposure factor. The exposure factor is a percentage. So it is a percent of the asset that would be lost in the case of an attack or a failure or something like that. Doesn't always have to be 100%. It can be. Doesn't always have to be though. And I give the example of like a fire suppression system. Say, you have a server room, fire starts, the fire suppression system will put out the fire, and it may not be a 100% total loss of the server room. It may only be a 20% loss or a 50% loss or something like that. So you got to have the EF. Now, to figure out the SLE, the single loss expectancy, is nothing more than the asset value multiplied by the exposure factor. That's it. That's the single loss expectancy. That's how much you expect to lose in the case of a breach or a fire or whatever the scenario may be. So, a scenario, and I have this one worded the same way for SLE and then slightly changed for ALE. So, we have a risk manager at a small bank. We want to use quantitative analysis. Quantitative and qualitative, you're going to hear those a lot. One of them you're dealing with figures, the other ones you're dealing with scenarios. If you ever get them mixed up, the way I remember it, when I see quantitative, I see the word quantity. When I think of quantity, I think of a number. So that makes me remember that when we're dealing with quantitative analysis, we're dealing with figures, not scenarios, not, on a scale of 1 to 5, or are we high risk, medium risk, low risk. So that's how I keep it straight. But anyway, quantitative analysis determines the SLE of running a business system at a location which is subject to fires during the year. A risk analyst reports to the risk manager that the asset value of the business system is 120 grand. Based on industry data, the exposure factor to fires is only 10% because of the fire suppression system. What is the SLE? So what is the single loss expectancy in the case of a fire? So let's look at the numbers they gave us. First off, let's look at this 120 grand. That's the asset value. Now let's look at the EF, the exposure factor. It's 10%. So we're going to take those two, AV times the EF, so 120 times 10%, or $12,000. So our SLE is 12 grand. 120 grand if there was no fire suppression system. If the exposure factor was 100%, it'd be 120 grand lost. But we're only losing 10% of that, so we're only losing 12,000. You see why this is used? This is used, you'll see it in the last question we have, because it's about as real case as you can get, whether it's worth spending the money to set up a countermeasure for a risk. If the countermeasure costs more than what you're losing, it doesn't make any sense. So we'll get to that. Okay, so let's add some things onto it. We already talked about AV, EF, SLE, but how about ARO and ALE? Okay, so let's get into those. The ARO, the annual rate of occurrence. How many times an event can happen in 1 year? Breaches can happen more than once a year. So they can happen 2 times a year, 4 times a year. So in a question, if they give you that this could happen up to 4 times a year, they're giving you the annual rate of occurrence. That's going to change how much money we lose. In the case of the fire, they didn't really give us an annual rate of occurrence, so we're assuming it's 1. But for each fire we lost is 12 grand. If there's 2 fires, we lose 24 grand. So we got to know the ARO, the annual rate of occurrence. That's going to help us figure out the ALE, the annual loss expectancy. How much we are expected to lose in 1 year. Or it could be spread out over multiple years. Okay? So this isn't just per event. This is per year. So there can be, if we count 4 years, that's, that would be multiplied by 4, or if there's 4 events in 1 year, that's what that is. Okay. So, the ALE question of a small bank, again, this is the same as the other question, but using quantitative analysis to determine the ALE of a business system which is subject to fires during the year. Same thing. Risk analysts, the asset value of the business system is 120 grand. Okay. The exposure factor to fires is 20% due to the fire suppression system. But they added something on here. Fires occur in the area on average of every 4 years. So one every 4 years. What is the ALE? What is the annual loss expectancy? Now, it's the same thing that we dealt with earlier, but they threw in that fires occur on average 1 out of every 4 years. So it takes 4 years for one fire to happen. So we're just going to throw that in the mix. So we start out with our asset value of still 120. In this case, the exposure factor became 20%. So that's 24 grand. Okay. If we stopped it there, that's our single loss expectancy if we didn't have an ARO. But we have an annual rate of occurrence. So fires occur on average of every 4 years, totaling 24 grand. So the fire is still going to take 24 grand worth of damage, but it's only happening once every 4 years. So it's asking us, what is our annual loss expectancy? So we take that 24 grand and just divide it by 4. We lose 6 grand a year. Don't really lose it. We really lose 24 grand when the fire happens, but 6 grand year 1, 6 grand year 2, 6 grand year 3, 6 grand year 4 becomes a 24 grand. Okay, that could happen in year number 1, that could happen in year number 3, that could happen in year number 4, whatever. But either way, we got to set aside 6 grand a year, knowing that there's going to be a fire every 4 years, on average every 4 years, to cover us for the 24 grand hit. So that's an ALE. Okay. Now, this is the question I had on my CYSA test. It's the same thing that we did just a second ago, but it gives you a scenario to see if something was worth purchasing. So we have a vendor proposal for a cloud-based SIEM solution. The SIEM solution would be justified by having reduced the number of incidents and therefore saving on the amount spent investigating incidents. Here's the proposal. External cloud-based software as a service, costing $5,000 per month. Expected to reduce the number of concurrent incidents per annum, so yearly, by 50%. The company currently has 10 security incidents per annum at an average cost of $10,000 per incident. What is the ROI? What is the return on investment? So, how much are we saving if we went with this cloud-based software as a service after 3 years? So let's pull our numbers. So $5,000 per month. All right, $5,000 a month, multiply that by 12, that's 60 grand a year. Okay, that's how much we have to pay for this. We now have 10 security incidents in a year at an average cost of $10,000 per incident. That's our annual rate of occurrence. So, 10,000 at 10 a year, that's 100 grand. So as of right now, we see we're spending 60 to save 100. Okay? That's not bad. But there's more. There's something that's very easy to overlook. We're going to see this here. This line here expected to reduce the number of concurrent incidents per annum by 50%. This is the exposure factor. Okay. Even buying this cloud-based solution, they're not going to fix 100% of our attacks. They're only going to fix 50% of them. Okay, so it will reduce by 50 or 50,000 a year. So they're going to, we're not going to lose 100 grand anymore. We're only going to lose 50 grand. Because this is going to save us 50 grand. So we're spending 60 grand a year for something that is going to mitigate 50 grand a year. See where we're going with this? The return on investment, okay, yeah, it's $50,000 at savings. But that $50,000 savings cost us $60,000 a year. So we're actually spending $10,000 a year more. Yes, our attacks are cut in half. There is something to say for our attacks being cut in half. But we're still going to have $50,000 worth of attacks, and we're paying 60 grand to protect us from losing 50 grand. So that negative 10,000, and this is where you don't want to get stuck. And this was on this question was on my test, or worded very much like it. The numbers weren't exactly the same, but one of the answers was a negative 10,000. But it's not asking that. It's asking you which of the following is the ROI for this proposal after 3 years. It's 10,000 a year that we're losing. At 3 years, that's a loss of 30,000. So you could have done all of your math right and missed this last line and got it wrong. This was actually one of my scenarios. It was written like a regular worded question, but it was in the scenario portion at the beginning of the test. It was a little bit longer. It did have more words to it. But just make sure you use every line. You don't miss a single line. Okay? These are definitely going to come in handy for you. So you definitely need to know it for CYSA and know it for SEC too. You'll have some general questions in SEC. Not so much in net, but it doesn't hurt to know it, even if you're going for net. CYSA, you need to definitely know it. It's a big part of the test. Basically half of one of the chapters is on quantitative, qualitative, and semi-qualitative risk calculations. So you definitely want to make sure you know those. Okay. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for tonight. Told you this would be a quick one. Keep on the lookout for us starting this new site and getting into some hacker challenges. I will do the same thing that I did on my other videos. I will give you hints towards finding the solution. See if you can find it yourself. And in the very end, I'll give you the answer and show you how I found it. Because there's multiple ways to do these things. Okay? So, until then, my friends, I will see you later, and have a great one.